Last few days we didn't learn, but before that we started Muktza. We learned just a quick review of what we learned so far. Muktza is rabbinic, according to most opinions. Muktza is something the Chachamim instituted, and there are a few reasons why they instituted the concept of Muktza. Muktza means moving something which is removed from the mind of the person when Shabbos began. So one reason is because if the Chachamim say you shouldn't talk on Shabbos, walk on Shabbos, like you do during the week, they don't want you touching things on Shabbos. Another reason is you might come to do a malacha with that thing. Another reason is you might come to carry it. Another reason is because people that don't work a whole week, so where do they have the uniqueness of Shabbos? They don't work a whole week. So there's the Chachamim institute of Muktza. And we learned that initially, in the time of the beginning of second Bais Din, people were extremely lax in the laws of Shabbos. So Nehemiah, Ezra and Nehemiah especially, made initially a takana: you cannot move anything on Shabbos except things pertaining to food. You know, cups, plates, forks, knives, spoons. Everything else is Muktza. That's it. You can't move anything because there was such a laxity in the laws of Shabbos, so they were very stringent. Then Chacham says, as time went on, people started keeping Shabbos better, so they were more lax in the laws of Muktza. But the bottom line is now we have a case of Muktza. Now last time we started explaining that there's something called Keli Shemalachti Leheter, a vessel's primary use is for something permissible. That basically is not Muktza at all. Okay? The second thing we're going to go back to the first thing. Last time we also started discussing something called Keli Shemalachti Le'isr. Keli means a vessel, a utensil. Shemalachti Le'isr, whose primary use is for something forbidden. Simple, an example we told last time, a pen is made to write. Writing is forbidden on Shabbos. So the primary purpose of a pen is forbidden usage on Shabbos. A hammer is primarily used to build, knock in nails, which is construction, which is forbidden on Shabbos. Therefore, this has what's called Keli Shemalachti Le'isr. Its primary use is something forbidden. So we learned this, you're allowed to move for one of two reasons. Either you want to do something permissible with it, like we said, you want to crack open a coconut, so you can use a hammer and a screwdriver, which both essentially are vessels that are used for forbidden usage, and you want to crack open a coconut, you'd be allowed to. Or scissors, we said, to cut open a package where there's no letters. Or if somebody left the hammer on the dining room table, and you need the place where the hammer is to set the table, so then you'd be allowed to move it because you need the place that it's on. Well, I just want to get moving on. 1 second. So now I just want to come back to Keli Shemalachti Leheter. Means a vessel is primarily, we're going to learn a lot of examples in these things. What is example of Keli Shemalachti Leheter? Means something which is primarily used for something permissible. Now even then, halacha says to move something for no reason whatsoever, you can't. So Pascal like the Aruch HaShulchan says, what does that mean? If you're moving it, obviously there's a reason. So they explain, no, sometimes you have stuff in front of you on the table. Yeah, you're just playing with it. You're not touching it for a purpose. It's there, you happen to play with it. So that you wouldn't be allowed to do, even on a vessel whose primary use is something permissible. But let's say, Keli Shemalachti Le'isr, where wouldn't you be allowed to move it? Let's say the hammer was outside, and you didn't want it to get stolen. So now you want to bring the hammer inside. So it's not that you need the place where the hammer was. You're not using the hammer for anything permissible. You just want to protect the hammer. So then you wouldn't be allowed to bring it in because that's not using it for something permissible. But again, we're going to come back into more details anyway. Let's start learning a few practical things, what things that are not Muktza. So basically, the bottom line of it is, and that's why it's interesting when you learn Muktza, when you learn things that you're not allowed to do, so then that's Muktza, right? So meanwhile, you're learning what you're allowed to do on Shabbos, what you're not allowed to do on Shabbos. Okay, for instance, a wristwatch, a clock is not Muktza on Shabbos. It's to tell time. That's not a problem. Electrical clocks, by the way, if you have a clock near your bed, so then the din is, it has a din of keli shemalachti le'isr. Because it's a clock with a radio, it's a lot of it, it's electrical. So you have radio and you have a lot of things over there. So again, what happens if you want to see the time? So, you're laying in your bed and you want to move it to see the time, that you'd be allowed to, because you're moving it for something permissible. You want to see the time. You're allowed to see the time. So then you can move it. Or if you have a fan. Now a fan is anything electrical. This is what they paskin. Anything electrical is called keli shemalachta le'isr. Anything that's electrical is a vessel whose primary use is forbidden. But what happens if I have a fan in my house, okay, and it's blowing right on me? And I don't want it blowing right on me. So I'm allowed to move it away. That's seirach gufay. I'm moving it for permissible usage, that it shouldn't blow on me. Or you want it to blow on you, so then you can move it blowing on you. But now, as far as keli shemalachta leheter, for instance, any games that you're allowed to play on Shabbos are not muktza. Now, there's a general concept of games. Now, generally speaking, halacha says this. Games on Shabbos you should be doing something more constructive, learning, davening, talking to your family, whatever. But in technical halacha, these things are not muktza. So for instance, any game that doesn't involve keeping score or forming letters or things like that, you're allowed to do on Shabbos. Any game that you keep score, you're not allowed to play on Shabbos, because if you play the game, you're going to maybe keep score. And then writing, you're not allowed to do on Shabbos. So because, I'll give you a simple example. In old halacha, in middle age halacha, back to the Middle Ages, you find the earlier poskim say you're not allowed to play chess on Shabbos. Why were you not allowed to play chess on Shabbos? Because years ago when people played chess, they wrote down every move. You made a move, you wrote it down. So then you wouldn't be allowed to play chess on Shabbos because you're going to come to write a move. Well, I'll give you another practical case. There's a game called Scrabble. Okay? Now Scrabble, if you don't keep score, then it's not a game. I mean, the whole thing is to keep score. Now you're not allowed to keep score. So therefore Scrabble is a game that you're not allowed to play on Shabbos. So it's a keli shemalachta le'isr. Its primary use is for something forbidden to do on Shabbos because you can't play it because you might keep score. But nowadays, let's say, chess, people generally speak, unless you play with a computer, that you can't do on Shabbos either. But if you just sit down for a chess game, again, nobody writes down the moves today. So therefore, the present, the last hundreds of years, contemporary halacha is right that you could play chess on Shabbos. It's not muktza. What? Monopoly we'll get to soon. Monopoly, according to my not so humble opinion, you're not allowed to play on Shabbos because bottom line of Monopoly is you're buying and selling. So some people want to say, but it's not really buying and selling. One second. It's all fake. But the bottom line is the game is you're buying and selling. That's the game. You're collecting rent. You might go to jail along the way, but you're collecting rent, right? You're buying and selling. That's the game. The game is buying and selling. So a lot of poskim write clearly you can't play Monopoly. Then by the way, all these new games, by Monopoly now is computerized, it's all electronic, and that for sure you can't do on Shabbos. But I'm saying, so again, so Monopoly would be another example of a game that you can't play on Shabbos. So therefore your Monopoly set would be Muktza, as a keli shemalachta le'isr. So what happens if the only case you're allowed to move the game is if somebody left on the dining room table and you need to set the table and you need to play so you can pick it up and move it. So what are you doing?
What about something like backgammon?
Backgammon we'll learn. Okay, we'll get into all those. Backgammon you can play on Shabbos because you don't write down the moves. Now, here's another issue. I'll give you...
If the Monopoly game on top of a game that you're allowed to play, are you allowed to take that game out?
Huh?
If the Monopoly game is on top of a game that you are allowed to play.
If the Monopoly, we'll learn those dinim later. The best thing would be to pull out the game that you do want. Or many people would permit it because you need the place. I'm moving it because I need the place to take the other game. But we'll see, there's a lot of dinim involved. Yeah. Okay, well, let's not go into each game, everybody's going to say. We're going to learn general halachos of the games that they mention here. And I'll give you another example. A bike, bicycles and tricycles. So tricycle, okay, now the only problem with a tricycle is it's a question of carrying. So let's say there's an Erev, or you have a backyard, whatever, there's no problem with a tricycle, because a bicycle, I know they say that Bavadia was matir, a lot of the Sephardic people are matir. I saw that later he rescinded what he wrote. I don't know, I'm not getting involved in that. But in Ashkenazic circles, we don't ride a bike on Shabbos for two reasons. Number one, besides the carrying aspect. So let's say there's an Erev. There's an Erev, so there's no problem of carrying. Okay? But there's a chash in a bicycle that Pos can bring down, is number one, the chain might fall off and you'll fix it. Or air will come out of the tires and you'll repump it. That's fixing a vessel. If you can't fill a tire with air, because now you're fixing something broken. It's one of the lamitas malachas called makar bepatish, doing the final touches to make something that wasn't usable. So a lot of poskim hold, and especially by the Ashkenazim, they're not makel on bicycles. Again, based on what they're saying, Rabbi Vaad said, I saw that in two places, one place says yes, one place says no. I don't know. I'm not getting involved with Sfardim. I saw, besides the fact, there's another issue if it's really in the spirit of Shabbos to ride a bike or not. But that's a second issue. So again, if you're not allowed to ride a bicycle, let's say, so then a bike is a kedesh malachta le'isr. So which means, what happens if you left it outside your house and you don't want it to get stolen? You left it in front of the house and they realize on Shabbos, so then you can't move it in. Now, if it says in this halacha, says this, you could cheat a little bit. It's not possible by a bike. But let's say I left my hammer outside. I don't want it to get stolen, right? So I really don't have anything to use it for. But what happens if I decide, you know what, I'm going to crack open a nut now. So now I create a purpose for the hammer that's permissible so I can cheat. Halacha says, even though I'm really bringing it in, that it shouldn't get stolen, which I wouldn't be allowed to do, but because I'm creating a usable purpose that halacha, so I can cheat a little. That's what Allah, it's called yadim. You can cheat a little bit that to do that. Or building blocks, for instance, is another issue. So the good...
To the bike?
Huh?
How you apply that to the bike?
I said you can't apply, what are you going to use something, create a usable purpose for the bike? What do you want to hit somebody with it? I mean, what do you do with a bike?
Sit on the seat.
Huh?
Sit on the seat.
Sit on the seat. Keep open the door, yeah. Okay, but for instance, there's another issue. By the way, Scrabble is another interesting thing. There's two problems with Scrabble, with some sets of Scrabble. So you have to know you have to know the facts, and you have to know the halacha. Like the old Scrabble sets were a plain board, no grooves, okay, and then you just put the letters in there, right? So that wasn't the only problem with that is keeping score. So you can't play it anyway. But what's called the deluxe Scrabble has little grooves that the letters fit into, and therefore you can flip around the board without the pieces flying all over the place, right? So that is a second problem. That's a problem of writing. Now I'm forming letters next to each other in a particular groove. That could be a shaila of writing. Just putting Scrabble letters next to each other it's not called writing. The letters are there, but if you put it into a groove, so then it's formation and it's what?
Letters that are stuck by a groove. Is that a biblical writing?
No, it's not biblical writing.
What's the rabbinic thing?
It's not biblical. It's not permanent writing. It's coming off in the... It's not biblical because it's not permanent writing. If somebody writes on a window that got fogged up, yeah? Or somebody, when your car's very dirty, you ever notice that in the back window it says, please wash me? Okay, so you wrote that on the dirt, but that's not permanent writing. So that wouldn't be biblical writing, that would be rabbinic writing because it's not permanent. Machat Shinazar, Mazam, Mecharev, Main, Kim Shibla, Gal Teda, Hanan Rakashi, Medat, Good